This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Have a fun one for you today. It wasn't that long ago that a drone at a field day would turn every head. You'd crink your neck and probably hurt the next day. But now they're becoming more common in agriculture in pretty quick time. Find out what you need to know if a drone is in your farm's future from the FAA drone guy, Kevin Morris, coming up on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast after this.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Welcome to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Thanks for watching, listening, wherever you may be, and make sure and like, subscribe, and follow wherever you get this podcast when you get a chance. Like many new technologies used in agriculture today, drones used to be a novelty. Now they're being used to plant seeds, scout crops from disease and insects, and protect them from those pressures as well. As more and more farmers and agribusinesses use drone technology, what do they need to know, and what about the rules and regulations they need to abide by? That's where our expert comes in this week on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. He's with the FAA, Kevin Morris, known as their drone guy. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Ty. Thanks for having me on.
Looking forward to the conversation because you've been involved in this drone space for years. Tell us about your experience with the FAA.
Well, I came to the FAA about 17 years ago. I was an airline pilot before coming over to the FAA. And once I got into the FAA, I had a lot of different jobs from investigations, enforcement. I was an aircraft accident investigator for a little bit. And then I got into drones because they were really, really interesting to me. And I could see that they were going to change the entire era of aviation moving forward. And I think you look back at the last 8 years since I've been in drones, and I think that would be an understatement. I think drones have done remarkable advancement for aviation. They're really, really cool. And so I got into drones. I've been on the safety end of drones, communicating drones, policy, regulation. So I feel like I've done just about everything drone. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
You've been on the front end of this technology, but is there anything that you didn't see coming 8-9 years ago in this space that we're using drones for today?
You know, I think one of the really interesting parts that we're seeing drones develop is the sort of the drone out of a box technology that's going around, where typically for infrastructure inspections, they'll have a drone that's located at a station and the pilot won't even be there. And that drone will automate and go do an infrastructure inspection on power lines, equipment, come back and report the findings. I think that's getting pretty cool in terms of like what the future holds. I really didn't see that aspect of it coming and growing as much as it did, but it's certainly changing everything once again in aviation.
I remember a few years ago being at seed dealer meetings, and when you saw a drone in the sky, it took everybody's attention away from what was happening on the ground, and they were watching the sky. But now it seems like if you see a drone at a farm show or at one of these seed dealer meetings, that, well, it's just another drone. How prevalent have ag drones become from an FAA viewpoint, and how is that tracked?
They're very, very prevalent. In fact, I think you might be able to argue that the agricultural industry is driving a lot of the drone technology and advancements. They're certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest user of drones across the country. So when we look in terms of how prevalent they're coming, because we're talking about drones, because we're talking about eggs, we're typically talking about dispensing product, a chemical or a pesticide of sort. That means we're talking about the old Part 137 operators, right? This is the certification, crop dusters, if you will, or aerial applicators, to use a little bit better term, have been operating under for years and years and years. So when we started to see drones transition into this type of operation, we saw that a number of years ago. Around 2014 was about the first time we started to see the very first Part 137 operator use a drone to apply a product to a field. That number grew steadily, although not exponentially, through maybe a couple months ago. We had about 178 total Part 137 operators. That has changed significantly in just the last few months. We've changed our process for certification of drone operators under Part 137. And today we're up to 550. So just a few months ago, we had about just under 200, and now we're up to 550 and growing. That number is actually up about 50 from the previous month. So when we're talking drones and we're talking ag, we are really looking at now an exponential increase in the amount of operators.
With that increase comes a need for even more communication. What type of outreach efforts are being done by the FAA to work with farmers and agribusinesses as more drones are being utilized on the farm?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's one of our most challenging aspects of continuing drone advancement. Look, we all realize that drones need to be safe, just like traditional aircraft. If we're going to be operating, we want to continue to operate, and we want to maybe continue to push the limits of what drones can do. We need to do that safely, and a huge part of that component is education. So when it comes to agriculture, it's a little bit different than sort of your standard, maybe recreational flyer outreach that the FAA might do, because agriculture is very local in nature. It really, what you're farming, what you're planting, what you're harvesting, and when you're doing all that really depends on what part of the country you're in. So we try to work with ag industry at the local level. We have an FAA safety team. There's one in just about every state that are dedicated to working with local communities, not only with just drone pilots around cities, but also agricultural operators in the countryside as well. We also attend a lot of conferences and events. I know, Ty, you mentioned you're starting to see more drones there. Hopefully you're seeing a bigger FAA presence there where we can help answer questions and educate folks. And then, of course, we're on the podcast today talking about drones and agriculture. So we try to do everything we can to make sure everybody understands what the rules are, how to fly them safely, and where they fit into this big thing we call the National Airspace System.
So if I'm a farmer in Ohio and I'm looking into this technology and I want to adopt drones as part of my operation, what do I need to know?
Well, how much time do we have? Where do I start? So I think that the most important thing to know if you're considering adopting drone technology is realize that if you're going to add a drone to what you do, you're really adding an aircraft to your business. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to adding a traditional aircraft to your operation, whether that be a crop duster or something else. What you're talking about here is what the FAA always has considered to be an aircraft, and that's a drone. So we're adding a drone, we're adding an aircraft. So then the question really becomes, what should you know about aircraft before adding it to your business? And well, there's a lot of things to consider. Budget certainly is one of them. When you're talking about drones and advanced capabilities, you're also talking about advanced price points. These aren't something you're walking into your favorite electronics shop, picking up off the shelf and going out to work your field. These are very specialized, advanced pieces of equipment, advanced aircraft. So the budget's going to come into play. How much acreage do you need to cover? How much experience do you have as a drone operator, as a pilot? You know, what if you're going to spend $10,000, $20,000 on a drone, which some of them can cost easily? You'd hate for that first flight to be your last flight. That's a very expensive flight lesson. So how much experience do you have? What type of products are you going to be dispensing? Are we going to be dispensing liquid? Is it a dry chemical? All those types of things factor in. Now, with drones, there are some additional considerations. For example, how far do you need to fly that drone? Most drone operations require that the drone stay within the operator's visual line of sight. Well, some of these farms are quite large, and that would be impossible to operate a drone, let's say, from your backyard all the way across your property and to do the work that you need. How long does that drone need to stay airborne? Is that farm located near an airport? So these are some of the things that really should be considered before adding a drone. I wouldn't go out and buy a drone and then figure it out. I would really do it the other way around.
Are there misconceptions out there about drone use in agriculture?
I would assume so. It's hard to say what some individuals' misconceptions might be, but I think I can generalize just a little bit here. Based on misconceptions we see in other forms of business, including ag, a lot of times people think it's just a drone. How risky can it be? And while certainly it's true that drones generally show less risk than a traditional aircraft, it's still not a risk-free operation. If you want to know what can happen when things go wrong with drones, really all you need to go is watch them on YouTube and check out images of drone injuries, and you'll quickly understand that it's not a zero-risk game here. But one of the things people need to understand too is that Just because you may have bought that drone yourself and you're flying it for your business, and maybe nobody's paying you directly to operate that drone, the FAA would consider that a non-recreational flight. In other words, it would be a commercial flight. So a lot of misconceptions out there regarding, well, if I'm not getting paid, then I don't need to do any of this FAA stuff and get my remote pilot certificate and register the drone, do all that stuff. And it's really not true. If that drone is being used in any sort of furtherance of business, then you're operating under what we call Part 107, which is our rules for not only normal drone flying, but also commercial drone flying. So I think the biggest thing to remember is you didn't just buy a toy, you really bought an aircraft and you're adding it to your fleet.
There are, of course, rules and regulations for good reason. Some of them you mentioned here just recently. If drones aren't used properly, there are consequences.
There are. And it's interesting. We can go back to one of the comments I had previously, which I keep trying to drive this point home, Ty, that drones are aircraft. So when we talk about, all right, well, what happens now if I don't follow the rules? What are the consequences? Well, the FAA's structure is set up that those consequences follow the same ones for traditional aircraft. So we have what we call our compliance program. So if we observe or become aware of any sort of non-compliance with our rules, that individual and all the circumstances surrounding that particular incident are taken into account. And then the FAA will make the best decision on how to prevent future non-compliance with those rule or particular rules that weren't followed. And a lot of times that could be just counseling. Drones, although they feel like they've been around a long time, they're still relatively new. And a lot of people, they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So a lot of times the FAA will come in and just counsel the individual, help educate the individual. Sometimes they can do additional training with their particular individual. Depending on the circumstances, we may be talking about fines or certificate action. We can suspend or revoke a particular certificate if need be. So the framework for enforcement action that the FAA has for drones is really just the same as traditional aircraft.
This technology is evolving at a quick rate. I have to imagine with the uptake in use that the rules and regs will continue to change as well as the industry does. Where can farmers and agribusinesses find that most up-to-date information to keep them compliant?
Well, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Ty, and I'm going to say our website is probably one of the best spots to go to. Our FAA.gov website has a tremendous amount of drone information on it, including information specifically tailored for agricultural operations. So if you can start at our website, you'll generally find the pathway to knowledge that you're looking for one way or the other. But I'll give you a couple of shortcuts. We have an advisory circular that we published not too long ago, and the number is 137, just like the operator, 137-1B as in Bravo. So Advisory Circular 137-1B is a great place to start. It's a plain language document that talks about the certification process for agricultural operators, but it also includes drones. So if you're looking at doing this and you're going to add a drone, I would start with that advisory circular. And then the second shortcut I'll give you is an FAA notice. And that notice is number 8900.659. So 8900.659. And that came out just not too long ago, and it outlines the streamlined process. We took the old process of waiting in line for the certification, and it took months and months and months, and we streamlined that for drone operators who are operating less than 55-pound drones to make that a much faster process. So that notice explains that new process, and it's been very well received by the ag community.
It is so much fun to see where this technology is going, and Kevin Morris has a front seat. I think I have a pretty cool job, but when you're considered the FAA drone guy, that's a pretty sweet gig too. Kevin, I appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you so much.
Thanks as always. Look to talk again. Thanks.